Slaves of sin. I was talking to somebody in distress this morning, a young mother of a very young family from the travelling community, who was describing in Technicolor the situation at home. About 2 years after their marriage, which of course was quite young, he had started on the usual course for many young people: drugs. Some months ago, she had to separate from him with all the consequences that that had. But just listening to her story, which by now is very familiar, I saw what slavery is. Do you know the damage that these substances do to a person's psyche? Do you know that a person who is obliged to keep on existing by dint of injecting or taking tablets is progressively a diminished human being? Everything eventually is subservient to the next dose. Nothing else eventually matters. Nothing. The Gospel talks about the fruits. By their fruits you will know them. We have no right to be in God's place and to pronounce judgment. We have no right to think more than we know. Only one right do we have: to observe. Calmly and in a balanced way, we can then draw our own conclusions. Now, I notice that by now the youth in Ireland is hugely manipulated without knowing it. And of course not just in Ireland, for we are just part of something greater. The fruits are to be seen, actually visibly. Look at your average young person now. Very beautiful girls choose to be ugly, ugly, ugly. And who is ugly? Your man down under. They are imitating the ugly. Fruits. Now this is not just a social fashion. They are being recreated in place where your man reigns. In the discourse of modern Ireland, there is something very akin to a church. In a deeply dark and obscure way, Satan is enthroned. Have you noticed that since the mid-60s, the style of our role models, stars, and what they do, and by now are expected to do, has hugely changed? If you look carefully at what is going on now on stage in these massive rock concerts, there is vulgarity, obscenity, and indeed Satanism, overt and evident. A young person, I say, no longer can go to one of these things and remain free from contamination. This week, I looked at something which is not of today, but it's already alarming people against what their children are getting into, already some years ago. This lady, Basilia Schlink, is a Lutheran nun who writes in a balanced way about the spiritual and the factual. And I want all the young people listening to be aware of this, that music has a huge power over the soul. For healing, in the first place, for that was God's design. harmony and beauty. Natural rhythm, which affects the body and invites it to homely dance. I open a parenthesis. When doing teacher training, we were obliged, because we're handling children in Wales, to know how to teach folk dancing. It was part of the curriculum, part of our culture. But this is something else. I'll just quote. It's almost dark. Dense smoke. Glimmering red and green lights. Pressing crowds. Flashing lights, like streaks of lightning, converge on the dance floor, where the lightning effects are especially unbearable, although the whole room is affected. The area along the walls is divided into niches with 4 to 6 places around a mostly dirty table. An abundance of glasses, bottles and cigarette stubs reveals how much has already been consumed. Deafening rock music, far above the decibel level acceptable to the human ear, makes conversation impossible. You have to shout for a minimum of communication. Drunken stammering, glazed expressions, or trance-like smiles. Probably drug-induced, wherever you look. Some are busy playing the slot machines. Many lie or sit huddled together, looking bored, while on the dance floor others dance, or rather are whipped into a frenzy by the hard beat. It's stuffy, and the smoke irritates both throat and eyes. The place has an air of emptiness, hopelessness, misery, despair, resignation, mindlessness, promiscuity, and filth. Even in this semi-darkness, it is possible to see that some of these young people still have nice, pleasant faces, whereas others already look burnt out and hardened. It is a shattering display of ruin in its early and later stages. At weekends, and for some, night after night, the disco is their life. I transpose. This hyped-up generation can no longer sit still when it comes either to what we're doing now. Observe how, through osmosis, everything in church, by degrees, is becoming noisier and thumpier, more and more human and profane. Not immediately, but bit by slight bit each time, so that also the mentality of the human enters in and reigns, and the applause there comes to man, and not to Jesus Christ, whose throne is forgotten about in his own home. Just this week, I was looking back at the past in my mind's eye. When 13, I happened to go into the Eastern celebration in Cardiff, and the local priest taught me eventually how to read Greek. He was a real Greek, Spiros Vasilos. And he, when I saw him in mode, ordinary, good Greek priest he was, reminded me of something I had forgotten. There is a place on earth where heaven and earth meet, and dignity and majesty are its language. Later on, as a student, I bumped into this man, Archimandrite Barnabas, a priest, monk, and indeed hermit near the university in Wales, in the middle of nowhere actually. So I went to him a lot, and I observed, and another osmosis took place. It was this: just being with somebody who was with God and behaved accordingly rubbed off. There was time, 3 hours at a time. There was otherness, great clouds of otherness. There was beauty, for he had a great baritone voice, in which, yes, in these ancient, unchanged chants, there was not more of the human and the thumping, not more of the noisy and the frenzied, but another atmosphere where God and man were free to meet beyond the realm of the dirty and the profane. For man needs otherness once a week, and if in church he finds more of the same, old Nick, my friends, has easy access to our already wounded and bandaged souls. We need peace once a week. We need healing for the emotions. We need something greater than ourselves and not more applause of what we know and are already. So with that, I sat down and wrote back, as it were, to the beyond, reminding myself how St. Paul went into ecstasy and said, whether in the body or out of the body, I know not. In church, we have the right to something of that, not drug-induced trance, but natural healing, where we are beyond what we do from day to day.
Whether in the body, whether out of the body. Lines written after returning to the incense-filled chapel, thinking of the noisy liturgy elsewhere. The liturgy of earth is made of earth, and man, the breath of man, wafts to and fro. The sound of heavy sound redounds in mirth that claps and taps, that made it, shaped it so. The grin of pleasure beams the leisured prayer. Into the void, not listening, for the soul pierced not the clouds, or blessed, for never there were heavy hearts ill-frenzied by the whole. The liturgy I hear in this Trisagion, unheard mid seraph wings, I know to be of music other made, Empyrean, where Godhead burns, learns not from me how to be rocked, for sleep rocked here by wings bids me stir naught, say naught, where cherub sings.